The dream. Can we be warned in a dream against a course of action which may be dangerous? I think this is hard to believe. If we can see the future in a dream, then surely the future already exists. If it does, then we have no freedom of action. We are not responsible for our own lives. How can our actions matter to ourselves or to anyone else? Before I tell you the dream, I ought to explain a little. It was the summer of 4 years ago. I was driving my family back from Italy through the south of France. My son had not yet learned to drive. My daughter was too young to drive, and my wife doesn't drive. I had been driving for the best part of 3 weeks. Perhaps I was tired, perhaps I could think of nothing except cars. The town in which we spent this night of the dream was Tyne El Hermitage. Now I'll tell you the dream. I was sitting in a big and powerful car. Its color was cream. I was driving at high speed through the country. I was approaching a bend in the road, and in front of me there was an immense lorry. My foot reached out towards the brake, but it did not touch anything. I looked down, there was no brake. Worse, my hand held empty air. There was no wheel for them to hold. There were no controls of any kind. Already we were almost into the back of the lorry. I shouted in alarm. A calm voice came from my left side, and I turned my head. A stranger was sitting there. He was a cheerful man of middle age. He was wearing a silk shirt, and on his head he had a red cap. I couldn't understand what he said. He spoke in rapid French, and my own French is very poor. I didn't care what he said. My eyes were on his clean, fat hands, which held the steering wheel. This car had the wheel on the left. He, not I, was in control. We ran safely round the bend. He turned the steering wheel slightly to place the car in the middle of the road. He was going to overtake the lorry. The road stretched straight ahead. It was bright in the sunlight and was quite empty. Only one other person was in sight. A woman was sitting outside a cottage which had white walls. This cottage was almost exactly ahead of us. She was sitting by a table and arranging some flowers. She wanted to sell some, and waved them towards us. This sign, for some reason, filled me with a terrible fear. Then I noticed that the flowers were arranged in a circle. They were just like the flowers that we put on graves. They reminded me at once of death. At this moment we have level with the lorry. In a few seconds we ought to have overtaken it, but then the lorry began to turn away from the side of the road, and towards our car. Its driver was doing this on purpose. The stranger by my side swore loudly and tried to turn away. There was a terrible noise of tearing from the back of the car, and then something exploded. The earth seemed to turn over, and the noise of flame roared in my ears. I awoke, and I was sweating. I was very disturbed by this dream, and could not sleep again. It seemed to warn me about something, and I wanted to explain it. Even if warnings are possible, this dream had no sense in it. What did it warn me against? Must I never overtake a lorry on a clear road? The road towards Paris is always filled with immense lorries. Most of them come up from Marseilles. I always have to pass them when the road is clear. I can't drive slowly behind them forever. No. This was not the meaning of the dream. Its root was in some kind of fear. I must try to find the fear, and then I could forget it all. I thought about my driving during the last 3 weeks. I tried to remember all the lorries and all the white cottages. I thought of all the cars which were painted cream. I remembered nothing of any great interest. I had supposed that the road in the dream must be in France. It was long, empty and straight. But then I remembered that we had overtaken the lorry on the right. So the dream was about a road in England. In England all cars keep to the left. Immediately I remembered something. 2 years before this, I had been traveling in the north of England. An American and I were preparing some programs for the radio. He had brought his car from America, and of course its steering wheel was on the left side. So were the brakes and other controls, but the color of his car was not cream. The American was a careless driver, and often overtook other cars against my advice. Remember that I was in a better position to see. I was sitting on the right. Once, beyond Nottingham, he played chicken. Chicken, as you probably know, is a game on the roads. It is increasing in America, because long journeys can be very dull. You just move your car into the middle of the road and stay there. When another car appears, it comes towards you in the middle of the road. The driver who turns away is the chicken. Quite often neither turns away. I gave him my idea about this game in the strong language of the north of England. We did not play it again, but probably it had left its mark on my mind. So then, when I was asleep, I saw it all again in a dream. I also remembered another thing one day when I was having breakfast. When we played chicken, it was an uncommonly windy day. We stopped at Chesterfield, and the American bought a cap. It was a black cap, not a red one, but in dreams details are not always exact. After this I forgot the dream until the afternoon. The big French lorries often play their own game. They stay in the middle of the road, and you can't overtake. You have to stay behind them. Sometimes you have to follow them for endless miles, although the roads are otherwise empty. This afternoon, we were following an immense machine which was making terrible noises. Perhaps it was loaded with big guns. When I blew my horn, the driver moved to the side of the road, but it was the wrong side. He drove along in the left, instead of keeping to the right. There was enough space on the right for me to pass him. But if I did that, I should be on the wrong side, so I just followed him for 2 miles. All the time I told myself not to overtake. I considered the situation from every point of view. I could certainly turn my car more quickly than he could turn his lorry. It was a very big and heavy lorry. Could I, perhaps, pass him quickly before he could do anything? If he turned to the right, he could easily kill us all, and by law he ought to keep to the right. Probably he only wanted a bit of fun, but he might want an accident. If he killed us, nobody would know. Nobody could blame him, he would be in the right. But it was such a heavy lorry that I could probably pass safely. He would have no time to drive into us. The road ahead was quite empty, and there were miles of it. I drove more slowly until some distance separated us. Then I increased my speed as much as I could. I drove towards that empty space beside the lorry. My car was moving at about 70 miles an hour. The front of my car was almost level with the back of the lorry. Then I saw something that knocked the breath out of my body. A woman was sitting beside a table of flowers outside a white cottage. The table was standing on the grass beside the road. For the first time in my life, I changed my mind while I was overtaking. My foot went down hard on the brake. The car rocked and rolled. From behind, I heard the sound of a horn. Another car was coming after us at a high speed. I knew its color before I saw it. It was cream. I pressed hard on the brake and turned the steering wheel slightly. I was just able to get behind the lorry without touching it. The other car passed us and the driver blew his horn wildly. It reached the lorry, and then the lorry turned towards it. For a moment I thought the car would pass the lorry safely. It was moving very fast. Then the front of the lorry just touched the back of the car. It was only a light touch, but it knocked the car towards the side of the road. It ran fast towards the woman at the table. The driver of that car was a master of the road. With the greatest skill, he turned it back into the middle of the road. If I had been in his place, I could not have done it. His control was wonderful. He waved angrily at the lorry driver and drove rapidly away in a cloud of dust. He was soon out of sight. We stayed that night in Fontainebleau. A big car was standing outside the hotel, and the back was nearly scratched. Its color was cream, and so I tried to find the driver. He was not wearing a red cap or a silk shirt. He was a young man from Paris, not like the driver in my dream. He spoke good English. I asked him if he would like the number of the lorry. I had noticed it, and I could have given it to him. But he only laughed. The law won't help you if you overtake on the wrong side. He treated the whole thing as a game. It tests your skill, he said. If the car is powerful enough, it can be done. But if you had tried, in your car, you would have failed. I didn't tell him why I had hesitated. There was no time. He was in a hurry and wanted to reach Paris without delay. Let us suppose I had not hesitated. Well, I don't really believe in dreams, of course, but something saved us all from a terrible death.